For episode 27 of Writing Pursuits, I am featuring Kat Vinson and the first chapter of her upcoming novel entitled Ember. We stepped through her chapter using my first chapter rubric. If you are interested in appearing on the show with your first chapter, then see the link in the show notes below. If the link is no longer available, please see my services page on writingpursuits.com. Hey, Writing Pursuits authors, welcome back to the show. To those of you who are new, I want to extend a special welcome. My name is Katherine McKee, and I'm glad you're here. I own Writing Pursuits, and I write and produce the weekly newsletter, Writing Pursuits Tips for Authors. I'm also a speculative fiction author. This program is for authors who like to discuss writing craft, author life, and book marketing strategies. Let's get to it. Katherine Vinson believes in making lemonade from lemons, happily ever afters, and stories with characters who struggle to do the right thing. She's married to her first love, and they are raising a beautiful teenage daughter in the Florida Panhandle. Her major was cross-cultural studies, which is her excuse for an obsession with Asian TV dramas and unique fantasy world building. So, 16-year-old Ember, the story's called Ember, right?
Right.
16-year-old Ember wants to spread her wings and fly, literally, but it's forbidden since a human might see. So she runs away from the Florida Keys to the Bermuda Triangle to the hidden island her people abandoned 18 years ago. And then she breaks a wing. When 20-year-old Cole senses someone in a haystack, hiding in a haystack, he isn't expecting a Vindalfer. Okay, did I say that right?
I think so.
Vindalfer?
That's all
Okay.
I said.
We'll go with that. Okay, when 20-year-old Cole senses someone hiding in a haystack, he isn't expecting a Vindalfer teenager. Then she gets herself injured and surrounded by an enemy tribe. He only has one option if he wants to protect her: bind herself as her keeper. Together, the two must uncover the mystery of why Ember's people left, succeed, and her people can come home, fail, and she may lose her wings forever. All right. That's awesome. Pretty good book description. It's almost there, I think. So, good deal. Good show. Okay, so this is a little mind map of the first chapter rubric. The thing you need to know is that there is a set of global elements up here from the story rubric. I'm a 3-story method certified editor, and so we use the story rubric all the time. I've developed this first chapter rubric because I feel like authors have a hard time with the first chapter. It's so important. It's so hard to get right. And I think that this will help people perfect the first chapter on their own and with the help of, an editor if they need it. So, in the global elements that we're most concerned about, there's the global conflict, global choice, and global consequences. You did a pretty good job of hinting at those in your back cover description. So here's the global conflict. It could be any of these. Let me move it down a little bit. Character versus self, character versus character, character versus society, character versus nature, character versus technology, character versus the supernatural, and character versus fate. I'm thinking yours is probably character versus self a little bit of this, and probably a lot of this. Am I right?
Right.
Okay.
I actually can't
Yeah, I
read very
think that
well.
that's going to be where we're at. She's going to have some things about herself. I can tell with the Ritter that you introduce in the second scene that there's going to be some character versus character conflict. That's always a good story. And then the overriding theme, though, is kind of the character versus society. Um,
Right.
Yeah, and then out of all that conflict flows choices, and all the choices deserve consequences. That's what you're kind of promising, is that there's gonna be consequences, so that's where the global elements come from, and here in a minute, we're gonna read the hook for your story, but the thing I'm gonna be looking at are these 5 elements: promise, point of view, setting, tone and mood, and genre. Under promise, it's you're promising there's going to be answers to the questions you raise. There's going to be conflict and there's going to be satisfaction in the end. So all that happens in that like first 3 paragraphs or so. And then there's the point of view. You have to establish point of view, and it needs to be clear and engaging. Setting is time and place. You're going to raise some questions about the set through the setting, and it gives context, right? So if that's missing, you don't have context, or you don't know where you are or what time of day it is. That only works if you've got a hostage situation. And then tone and mood is what I mean by that is you're creating emotion and you're promising that it's going to be enjoyable. And then with the genre, you're going to establish the genre pretty much right away, and your readers are going to think it's going to meet their expectations. So that all has to happen in the hook. And that's why we're going that's where we're going with this. So let's, without any more ado, let's see if I can find the actual manuscript. Here we go. Hey, that seems to work. Can you see the manuscript now?
I can see it.
Awesome. So this is where I said we're going to stop. And Kat, if you would, since you wrote it, I'm going to let you read it.
Okay. Clear skies, a strong breeze, and absolutely no one around. Just right for flying. Standing at the edge of the trees, Ember gazed across a clearing scattered with sedges and palmetto plants. She'd found the secluded spot 6 months ago, a barren space deep in the hardwood hammock of the Florida Keys, and it had quickly become her favorite hideout. Sliding her backpack off her shoulder, the 16-year-old peered into the top of a nearby gumbo limbo tree. There, she spotted the familiar broken stub high among the peeling red branches. Her bag with red schoolbooks and leftover packed lunch would be out of reach of most nosy creatures up there. A running start into a leap, and her webbed wings unfurled with a crisp snap. She hovered for a half second, looping the bag on the branch before her sneakered feet landed back on the forest floor. Now to practice.
That's a very clear hook. Um, I kind of gave you that last sentence because I felt like it was the hook to the rest of it that, leads into the next action that's going to happen. Um, Let me show you the rubric. This is what the rubric looks like. The actual rubric, not the map. And I actually even have a table of contents to help people find the section they're looking for. I copied your blurb up here, or your back cover description. And then this is kind of the way it works is every section, or in this case it's a subsection, has a table, and they each have the same heading: undeveloped, fair, good, excellent. Excellent is usually just ridiculously hard to achieve. If you have straight good, you've got a very strong first chapter, and you really don't have much to worry about. But this is like the hook is likely to be quoted from now on. Like Pride and Prejudice. Everybody knows the first sentence of Pride and Prejudice, right? So
Right.
that's kind of a little bit unattainable. They're going to print it on bookmarks and T-shirts. Okay, all right, calm down. But anyway, this is a promise of conflict, answers to questions, satisfying story. And so I say that your hook is original, interesting. Immediately questions are raised in the reader's mind. Some form of conflict is clear, and there's a promise of a satisfying story. Readers want to keep reading. They are hooked. So what I really like, let me put that right, is that just right for flying. Your very first sentence is excellent. So clear skies, a strong breeze, and absolutely no one around. So this hints at conflict right away. She's keeping a secret, right? And that means that somebody would be upset if they found her. So well done. And then before the end of the first page, I have the following questions. Ember can fly? Whoa, wait. Is she a fairy? What's going on here? And why does she have to practice in secret? That's my second question. And what is she practicing for? Who would keep her from using her wings and why? And then finally, why is she trying to blend in with her clothes? That part comes next where it describes her clothing and the effort she's made to blend in. And so really good, really good stuff. And that's the first one of the 5 things we talked about in the hook was the promise. So loads of questions, a promise of conflict. I think it's going to be a satisfying story. So then the next thing is point of view. Well, obviously we're really in her head. She hasn't said anything, but we're in her head. Memorable characterization begins immediately, or the narrator charms the reader in the first 3 paragraphs. So, I felt a connection to her, the kid after school who's doing something that she thinks she needs to do, but everybody else might feel like she doesn't need to do. So, we are strictly in her point of view. Also, really well done. Let me go over to your manuscript here. We know that her name is Ember. We know she's 16 years old. We know she is in school because of her school books and leftover packed lunch. And what was the other thing? I think that was pretty much it. But we know a lot about this character already. And also, we know that she has wings. Maybe most important of all, we know she has wings. So let's go back to our rubric here. And then um, hook the setting. You've set the setting very well. Clearly scattered with hedges and palmetto plants, hardwood hammock of the Florida Keys. So we know kind of where we're at. Florida Keys are those little chain of islands at the end of Florida that a lot of people haven't
Right.
been to. Uh, gumbo limbo tree, peeling red branches, nosy creatures, and you can guess what time of day it is because you mentioned the leftover lunch and the fact that she's had, it's afternoon. So that's very clear. And it's place and time. So setting is communicated well without you didn't do, oh, it was 3 o'clock after school. I had just walked down and I hid myself in the woods and I did this and this and this and this. And you did that without a bunch of information dumping. You just stuck it in there. The little details were sprinkled in. So I felt like that was very deftly handled. Okay, tone and mood. So I said good. The hook sets a clear tone and mood. The word choices and phrasing are original, engaging. Readers feel confident they will enjoy the experience because of the author's tone, and the emotions they feel at the beginning make them look forward to getting on with the story. Immediately I was intrigued because this is her favorite hideout. Would be out of reach of most nosy creatures. I want to know what kind of creatures are in this woods that'd be interested in stuff. Absolutely no one around. And then I loved this sentence. Her webbed wings unfurled with a crisp snap. She has sneakered feet, and now to practice. That is a very great way of starting your characterization. Not only does she want to do something in secret, but she's evidently disciplined enough to want to practice, which is like, wow, that's kind of unusual for a 16-year-old. I don't know about you, but I didn't want to practice anything when I was 16-year-old. So the reader can sense Ember's satisfaction and her anticipation. they can feel confident they will enjoy the experience. Okay, final section of the hook is genre. The hook establishes the genre of the story and makes a promise that it will be consistent with genre expectations. I'm going to say this is a contemporary fantasy. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so what we have here is just right for flying. Right away, we get this little hook here that tells us something's going on. And then she has webbed wings and she flies up, hooks her bag on the branch, and then she plops back down to the ground. So clearly, she's not a normal human. So
Right.
well done. And I'll just sneak a peek down here. She's thinking about so for the full chapter, we're looking at these things. Let me there we go. Point of view, setting, normal world, which is not the same as setting, genre, stakes. I call them the three C's, but what they are is conflict, choices, and consequences. And then the cliffhanger ending. So those are the things I'm looking for in a great first chapter. So point of view is POV type and the tense you've chosen, whether it's relatable and whether you stay in active voice. I'm always looking for that, especially in young adult fiction. And then setting needs to be intriguing, immersive, world building. I'm sure it's going to get even more so when you go to the island. But I thought the world building was fine even in the very first because you're talking about culture. And so the culture comes through in that. And then whether it is representative of the main character. So I think her being out by herself practicing her flying in the middle of the panhandle, like whatever forest, scrub, whatever you would call it, is representative of Ember. So where you begin is kind of where she's at, if you know what I mean. It's representative of her. It's also representative of the conflict to come because she's trying to keep a secret. And
Mhm.
and her whole society is consumed with keeping their secret. And so that leads also into the theme. So that's really good on the setting. Normal world, before snapshot, wants and needs. We'll get to that in a moment. Genre, names and details, tropes, expectations, stakes, goals and motivations. Death is on the line. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then I already talked about the three C's, but conflict, choices, and consequences, and then the cliffhanger ending. Okay, so enough ado about that. Let's go back then to your manuscript. Let me find it again. And I'll read the next section starting on page 3. Snapping her fingers. Okay, she's in the air now. She's practicing. Snapping her fingers, sparks ignited and formed a flaming sphere in the palm of her hand. Furrowing her brow, she aimed, pulled back her arm, and whoa, silhouettes shifted on the left side of the clearing. The fireball slipped from her grasp as she lurched backward. The sound of her beating wings filling her ears. She searched the treetops, but she was too far out, nowhere to hide. She hung exposed as two figures stepped out of the overgrowth. It was too late anyway. Then she recognized them and let out a shaky breath, her wired muscles losing their tension. How had they known she was here? Vindalfar, like her, both Skyla and Miss Ellie wore similar expressions, though her sisters looked more triumphant, while her favorite teachers looked more disappointed. Oh no. Ember started to sink but stopped herself. Steeling her spine, she resumed the steady beat of her wings. She refused to be ashamed. Plastering a chipper smile on her face, Ember waved and swooped over to meet them. She lingered for a moment, enjoying the way their heads had to tilt back to look at her before touching her toes to the ground. With forced nonchalance, she reached over her back and loosened the ties that held the flap of her shirt aside. Her wings slid behind the opening and folded against her back. She pretended to be occupied, brushing back her hair and straightening her top. What brings you two here? Her older sister snorted, tossing her icy blonde ponytail. Are you kidding? I knew you were up to something, but this? She threw her hands in the air and turned to Miss Ellie. You see? I knew it. Miss Ellie frowned and shook her head, her loose bun bobbing with the motion. Her glossy brown hair was streaked with the beginnings of gray, a sharp contrast against her warm, tawny skin. Oh, Ember, what are we going to do with you? Skyla paced in a circle around them, talking almost to herself. This is big, too big. I don't want to even know how much trouble you can get in for something like this. Ember cut her a sharp look. Then don't tell. It's nobody's business. She clenched her fists at her side. I'm not hurting anyone, and I'm careful, so no one sees. What's the harm? Miss Ellie laid a hand on Ember's forearm. Ember, you know it's too risky. The woods are full of backpackers. What if we'd been tourists? And what if you'd started a forest fire? Skyla joined in. Remember what happened the last time you played with your gift? We're lucky you didn't burn the house down. It was a melted shower curtain. How am I supposed to control it if I never get to practice? Ember defended. Not all of us have the convenience of invisible gifts. Her stomach roiled. All her secret plans would be ruined. She'd worked too hard, come too far with her abilities to give it up now. She scrambled for the right response to diffuse the situation. Maybe. She deflated, drooping her shoulders and looking at her toes. You're both right. I'm sorry. Ember hoped the contrition in her voice would at least convince Miss Ellie, though she knew she'd have to come up with something different for her straight-laced sibling. She pressed her lips together. Did I put a stop sign? Yeah, okay. This is longer than I thought it was. She pressed her lips together and reached out to clasp her teacher's hand in both of hers. Please don't tell my parents. I promise no more secret practices, please. She threw herself into she threw everything she had into the plea, mentally crossing her fingers. Miss Ellie pulled her hand away and narrowed her dark green eyes, searching Ember's face. Ember tried not to blink. After a long moment, the teacher sighed, and Ember knew she had won this round. Not one more practice. Ember nodded. Not here, anyway. And you'll stay after class the rest of this week to clean up as punishment. She nodded again. Then I suppose I can keep this incident to myself. But if it ever happens again, Ember bounced and launched her arms around Miss Ellie. Squeezing her in a tight hug, she squealed, Thank you! Skyla gawked, but she broke the single most important rule we have. Ember released Miss Ellie and turned to her sister. I know, and I'm sorry, okay? I won't do it again. Skyla huffed and crossed her arms, scowling. Ember turned back to Miss Ellie. I know I said no more, but she pointed up the nearby tree. A smile flitted across the teacher's face. You may retrieve your bag. One last time. Ember dashed past and leapt in the air, her wings popping out as she reached to get the bag one last time until she left on her adventure. But she wasn't going to tell either of them that part. Okay, so that's the stop. That's the stopping place. So that's almost the end of that is the end of this scene, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to read down there. Um, okay, so let's switch over to our rubric again and go to the full chapter headings. The first element is point of view, POV, who is telling the story. And I just highlighted one particular part in the good column, prepared to root for the characters because they are shown to be relatable. There is little passive telling or shallow prose. So, very good. Um, I have noted a couple of places to tighten this up where you come close to telling, but overall, this is strong POV. Um, let's go down to the setting part. The setting is intriguing, interesting, and easy for the reader to see and experience. There's some sections above where we started reading this time that talk about the fact that she can see the ocean and she can see the road. And so you've put it into context. There's adequate information for context without the information dump. Again, you do a really deft job with that. Most of the senses are involved. The choice of the opening setting is representative of her. The setting hints at the conflict to come, the tone, mood, and theme. Okay, you do this twice, once for each scene. After the school in scene one, or after school in scene one, and early evening in scene two, we can feel Florida's climate, the housing styles, the foliage, and so forth. Um, in scene two, you introduce the sleek silver Lexus. You say it sat in front of the closed garage. Not only does this cement the contemporary setting, it helps characterize Ritter Quarren. Is his name Quarren or Quarren?
I call him
Quarren.
Quarren.
Okay. The next section is the normal world. And I want to cover this before we get to the house. So, um, the normal world is like a before snapshot. You've taken a picture of what it's like before everything kind of goes awry. You connect the reader to the character. And I know that her getting caught practicing was not according to her plans, but there was really at that point, at least in the first scene, there's no consequences that are really dire. You know, she has to come in after school. Well, big whoop. And she's got to figure out a way to get her sister on her side. Okay. But it connects the reader to the character, sets up the character arc and plot context. So the character's normal world and their place in it are communicated in a clear before snapshot. The reader doesn't feel as though they have seen it all before. By the end of the first chapter, the reader sympathizes and relates the protagonist's inner conflict, wants, and needs. So, would you like to read the third scene that I've done, or the third section I've marked? And let me show you where that
Sure,
is.
you'll just have
Let
to
me see
tell me
here.
where to stop.
Let's pull this, and we'll introduce it as this is Corin, their visitor, Ritter Corin. I guess that Ritter is a title of authority,
Like
like an
an Ember?
elder. So he's Ritter Corin, and he's at the house, and he's on this mission to convince um, Skyla and Ember's parents that things need to change.
My eldest is a surgeon. He can remove our wings easily and safely. In fact, I have volunteered to be the first subject. Mama gasped. But our wings are a liability, Quarren interrupted. The Ritters have not made the procedure mandatory yet, but it is something we highly encourage everyone to consider. Ember exploded down the steps and burst into the living room. Her parents snapped their heads up while Quarren merely raised an eyebrow. Had he known she was eavesdropping? I won't! You can't make me! Ember! Mama's hand flew to her chest. Storm clouds gathered in Papa's eyes. You've been listening. She tried her best to ignore the cold, smug look on Ritter Quarren's face. I don't want suitors. I won't get married. And why is it so wrong to ask questions? She paced while she spoke, but swung around and faced her parents now. Why do we have to live this way? Why have wings if we can't use them? Why can't we go back to Fristed? Mama glanced away with sad eyes. Papa looked conflicted. Quarren just looked venomous. You see, he spat. The sooner this fool girl is dealt with, the better. That's enough, Papa cut in. Ember bit back the retort on the edge of her tongue. Papa walked to the front door and opened it, gesturing to Quarren. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Ritter. We'll take it from here. Quarren's face was a mask of ice as he rose to his feet. With an uneven gait, he crossed the space and stopped in the doorway, his back to the room. The Ritters will leave it to you then. Good day, Quarren, was all Papa replied. The man exited, and Papa shut the door behind him before turning to face Ember.
So she was listening on the steps when she was supposed to be in her room, doing homework. And they say eavesdroppers never hear good of themselves. Well, there you are. Proof of the pudding. Uh, let's see here. Normal world. So the normal world was before, and now we see that her normal world is that she wants to know about their history. And my comment was Ember deserves to know about Vindalfer history, and why they keep it on the down low with their young people is beyond me. However, maybe it's so vital to keep it from the general population, they have to keep it hush hush. We can root for Ember's desire to keep her wings and her childhood intact, and we sympathize with her need to understand why she must deny herself the pleasure of flying and using her gifts. This is a great before snapshot of a nuclear Vandal. I'm going to mess it up every time I say it. Vindalfer family just trying to fit in and live life among their own kind, much like every immigrant population. We also understand Skyla's motivations, and Skyla just wants a boyfriend. So that's their normal world. They're this little family of five. Actually, there's a brother somewhere that we haven't met yet, and they're just trying to make a go of it in their little community of people that have immigrated with them 18 years before. So good job. Good job. Honor conventions and expectations. The first chapter promises a satisfying experience in the reader's chosen genre by meeting expectations and including tropes they recognize. Names and other details are consistent with reader expectations. So their names so far that I know are Skyla and um, Ember and Ritter Quarren. I don't know Mama and Papa's names. Miss Ellie is the other person that we know. So far so good. They're not terribly unusual, but maybe that's on purpose. They do have powers. They mention magic. They have a secret history, and they have a complicated culture. So you're ticking the boxes of a contemporary fantasy pretty strongly. Are there others that you were aiming for?
It's going to be a little bit of a romance, but that doesn't happen until she meets the guy.
So that's in the future. Well, that's fine. I think
Right now, she couldn't care less about boys.
I laughed out loud. I'll keep that one on, away from the audience because it's really good and they need to read the book. Okay, death is on the line. The first chapter shows this is the one place I really put you over in the excellent category because you nailed this. The first chapter shows protagonist's goals, motivations, and reveals complex and thematic stakes. Death, possibly in more than one form, is on the line. For extra credit, the stakes are paired with a time fuse. The reader cannot put down the book without knowing what happens next. Generally, stakes can be something like emotional death, spiritual death, social death, political death, or physical death. So, you did a great job of lighting the fuse by showing Ritter Quarren's desire to I should put a doing de-wing the population and to subdue any dissent by pairing off the young folk so they won't intermarry with the humans. So he's already putting that out there. He wants it to happen and he wants it to happen soon and everybody needs to consider getting their surgery, blah blah blah. So that kind of moves up the time frame. Ember was already planning to do something to escape somehow to go and find this island, right? But he's kind of escalated the situation and put it on a fast track. So for Ember, emotional and social death are on the line right from the beginning. She longs to fly and use her powers and to return to her roots. Conflict. In the first chapter, we got a lot of conflict. We've got her trying to get along with her sister. Um, and there's other stuff going on. The protagonist must make a choice, and whatever choice they make has associated risks and consequences. So the reader wants to read to the next chapter. Larger cultural political conflict is also lurking on the horizon. You can tell that. Pitting her family against their people if they don't fall in line. But for Ember, she must fight against her urge to practice her powers and use her wings, which for her people are very natural desires. She has already decided she won't give that up. So she's made a choice. And we get to see that choice and the fact that there's going to be some consequences of that. So that puts her in a direct path of conflict with her family and her people. Ritter Quarren gets to debut as a probable, and I meant to say probable, representative of an authoritarian leadership. Or at least, yeah, I think authoritarian works. At least that's the way it looks right now, bent on making every
Right.
Vindalfer person submit to the rules without dissent. That's his desire anyway. I don't know about the rest of the elders, but for Ritter Korn, that's his goal, right?
Right.
And they hint that he's got a history that would provide him motivation for feeling that way. Yeah.
Right.
So, types of global conflict, I put this in here just so that we can what you're doing is this is the first chapter is kind of supporting what will come later. It's kind of hinting at things to come. So, we have character versus self, character versus character, character versus society. I don't really think that we're talking about nature, technology, supernatural, or fate. There's always time and a place that these could come up in miniature, but these are the big overwhelming ones, and probably character versus society is really the big one. Am I reading it right?
I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. Well, that's great. Okay. So good work on that. So choice in the first chapter puts your plot in motion. Uh, by introducing the conflict to come over wing surgery and early marriage, you're pushing the main character to make a decision to escape rather than comply. So you set her on the fast track, and you've just shoved it into motion. So I expect the next chapter to be really intriguing and good because what is she going to do now? Especially since the parents are going to send them off to grandma's house, closer to the coast, I might add, or at least closer to the big city. They're going to give her a reason to be away from home. So anyway, I like that.
Right.
Okay, consequences in the first chapter are optional. The protagonist struggles to make difficult choices. Knowing this is the whole first chapter, and this is what you're looking for as far as good consequences. Knowing the consequences will be painful or costly, even if they make the right choice. The stakes are high, and the decisions will have a ripple effect through the rest of the plot. So Ember lies. This is one of her choices. Lies to placate her teacher and makes a deal with her sister to ensure Skyla's silence. These deceptions will cost her, although she suffered no real consequences in the first chapter except the displeasure of her parents. The Ritter's visit and Ember's outbursts also seem to have prompted her parents to decide to send their children away, to get them out of town on the pretext of putting the grandparents' house in order before a tropical storm arrives. So even though the consequences aren't immediate, they're hinted at, they're coming. And some of it's due to Ember and her choices. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the cliffhanger ending. The first chapter ends with compelling unanswered questions. I want to go to the first scene, if you don't mind. So, the end of the first scene. So, right here, Ember dashed past and leapt in the air, her wings popping out as she reached to get the bag one last time until she left on her adventure. I honestly think that's the end right there. Until she left on her adventure. I think this can kind of go without saying. So it might could go away. What do you think?
I agree with that.
Because I think what you've got here is each scene needs to kind of end this way, where you've until she left on her adventure. What adventure? You know, that's the immediate. I mean, that's an unanswered question. You've introduced a new question in my mind. Wait a minute, what's she gonna do? And so then, yeah. So I would get rid of this sentence. It's pretty obvious that she's not going to tell them. So this one, I would say it looked like her timetable had just moved up. That's that's fine because that makes you turn the page. Wait a minute. So now what is she going to do? Because you already know she's planning to run away. But they're sending her off and now her timetable has just moved up, right? So that's a natural cliffhanger there too, and that is the end of the chapter. So and that is our first chapter rubric. We got through all of these things without too much, dilly dallying. I do have notes in the manuscript itself that I'll be sending to you, and it's just a lot of nitpicky stuff. But that's it. That's all I do is I nitpick things to death, and then you'll see. I hope that it won't be too scarring. You have any questions now, though?
Um, I don't think so. I've worked really hard on this chapter, so it's nice to get the feedback and know that, that you can see it.
Right, and I that's just it. I can tell that it's been polished a lot. It's been looked over a lot.
I know.
And so now, you just have to make the rest of the book live up to it. So kind of when are you hoping to are you planning to do this as a get an agent for this?
um, I'm planning to try once I finish fully editing the first chapter. Um,
Maybe towards the end of this year, or this summer
yeah,
maybe
hopefully.
do some.
Yeah, I've been hoping to get it done, but it's just life keeps happening.
Right, right. I understand. A lot of gets in the way, especially, you work and you have kids and anyway.
Exactly.
It's hard to get the first one done. It really is. Especially just not knowing what they're going to look for. But hopefully, between what I've got here and what you've already got, a strong beginning, I think you don't have to worry about your first chapter anymore because it's very strong. Well, thank you, Kat. And good luck with this book. I'll
Well,
be
thank
very
you.
interested to see how it turns out.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching Writing Pursuits. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you have questions or comments, leave them below. And that's all I have for today. Until next time, keep writing, my friends. Keep writing.